Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out to attend our very short webinar on the new application to increase the dollar-based reference price on wheat. So let me perhaps just kick off by making sure that we all have a common understanding on what is being requested here. So right now, the dollar-based reference price is $279 per ton, and they're asking to increase it by $10 a ton. So it's important for those of you who don't perhaps understand how exactly this works. Let me take a minute to explain to you what is actually going on here. So we have three products which have their duties calculated by reference to a global price. So that is wheat, sugar, and maize. So when the global wheat price dips below the reference price for a particular period, what will happen is the duty will then be calculated. I'm oversimplifying a bit, but the duty will be calculated as basically the difference between the reference price and the market price. And so the point of it is, if the global price drops, the size of the duty goes up. When the global price rises, the size of the duty drops. And so what we're dealing with here is altering the reference price. So if you think about it, based on what I just described, if you raise the reference price, then the global price will be more frequently under that reference price than over it, which means, number one, you will have a duty in place more frequently, and number two, the size of that duty will be larger. Sorry. So you'll have it for longer, and the duty itself will become bigger. Now, the investigation here is looking at the reference price itself. It is not looking at what the particular duty rate at a given moment will be. That's quite an important distinction, because the change in the duty should be automatic. In other words, when you meet the criteria of the change, there isn't another investigation that happens. What is meant to happen is that the duty should automatically shift up or down. And that's one of the things the applicants have asked for. Now, in reality, that system has not worked well. It's improved a little bit in the last year, but for a very long time, this was a little bit of a mess. In other words, when the duty should have risen, it just wouldn't. ITAC would send their notes through to the minister wouldn't sign off on it, and it became a little bit of a mess. So one of the things that they're asking for is an automatic trigger mechanism so that we can get the shift to happen a little bit quicker. And I would argue, no matter which side of this you are on, that is a good thing. I think a predictable process is almost always better than an unpredictable one. And so that is what they are proposing to do here. Now, there are two categories of product that make this up. There is the wheat itself, and then there is the flour that is made from the wheat. And here we run into our first fairly substantial problem in this case, which is that they only brought the Gazette was only published for brown wheat flour. So if we look at the application itself, the application asks for protection on wheat as well as flour. So let me explain another component of how the calculation works. The wheat itself follows the process that I had described, but the flour duty is a derivative of the wheat duty. So the flour is whatever the wheat duty is times 150%. Then that will give you the flour. So flour cannot be changed independently of the wheat itself. And this is quite an important problem for ITAC to fix. They need to republish the Gazette. They need to put the correct tariff codes in. It is not clear to me that they could alter the duty on wheat when they've only called for comment on flour. And like I said, it most definitely is a mistake. To give you some sense of the volumes that are traded, Really what we are dealing with is wheat imports at volume. The flour is a fairly small part of that, whether it be brown or other types of flour. It's worth noting that there is a rebate, and here we're looking at it from the perspective of South Africa. But basically, I'll use the example of Lesotho. Lesotho is given a quota, and each year they can import wheat without paying any duty on that wheat. So here are the quota levels at present. So Botswana can import 90,000 tons and so on, Lesotho 80. And what Lesotho can then do is they cannot sell that wheat to any other country, but they can convert it into something else, and then they can trade it. So, for example, Lesotho converts a lot of its wheat into brown flour. That brown flour can then be exported, and is in fact exported, to South Africa. Namibia imports wheat, converts it into pasta, and the pasta is then traded, but the wheat itself cannot be traded. This particular rebate is not being fiddled with, so these will still apply. Now, there's an interesting dynamic that occurs because of these rebates. So if we get to the pasta example, for example, Namibia has a baked-in advantage over South Africa because they can import 120,000 tons, convert that to flour to pasta, and if I have my numbers right, about 95% of the cost of pasta is the wheat itself, and the others is a bit of sugar and a little bit of water. And so you can imagine that they become more competitive because of the rebate. In other words, the higher the duty is, the better their product will perform relative to South Africa's. But that is not being touched here. So that will remain in place. However, because the wheat duties will be higher, the relative advantage to these other countries will also be increased. And then, of course, the automatic trigger mechanism. So it should take, from the moment the trigger is hit, from when ITAC take their decision, the two ministers, etc., at most it should take 30 days. For years, that took much longer, many months, creating havoc for farmers, etc. So this automatic trigger should dramatically shorten that period. I'm hoping to even less than a month. But of course, that moves in both directions. And so where are we at the moment? Well, any interested party in the value chain, whether you are growing wheat, baking biscuits, whatever it might be, this will impact you. Now, how that will impact you is, of course, very different depending on where you are in the value chain. But you have a month to file a response. Of course, you should give us a call and see if we can help you. And at the end of that process, this decision will be taken. So you put your arguments in. Let's say you're growing wheat. You would probably argue you'd like to see the duty rise. Someone else is making biscuits. Maybe they want to see it reduce. What will then happen is the Commission will take a decision on that. That decision will then take the form of a recommendation to the Minister of Trade. The Minister of Trade, if he approves it, it goes to the Minister of Finance, and he says, would you please amend the Customs Act to reflect this new rule? And the Minister of Finance asks SARS to make the change. And all of that should take 6 months from the date of initiation. It has not taken that, it's not moved that quickly for many years now, but that is the theoretical point. So 6 months from now, we should theoretically have a decision. In reality, these cases average about 27 months to wrap up, but there has been improvement. So it's entirely possible that within the next 12 months, we see this updated. And from there, when the new trigger mechanism goes in, so we now have a new dollar-based reference price, the duties will then automatically be calculated against that new base, and off we go to the races. Let me perhaps just add one more thing. fairly soon, in the next few months, we will be launching a product that will give you pinpoint accuracy on when changes have been triggered, what the duty should be changing to, by when it should change, and so on. If you're interested, let us know, and we'll be sure to invite you when the product launches. But for now, your immediate issue is you need to think of what your position is relative to what is being requested. And if you want to have a meeting, contact us. You've got our details. And otherwise, good luck.